This is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's, and for Archie's as well, because
The document was only 6 pages long, but the moment Prince William placed his signature beneath the royal seal, the relationship between the monarchy and Meghan Markle changed forever. No public ceremony followed. No statement was issued from the palace steps. Yet behind a locked door at Windsor, one decisive stroke of a pen removed privileges, closed private channels, and sent a warning that reached far beyond one family dispute. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered the meeting room after months of arguments hidden outside the palace. Catherine stood near the table as an aide placed the royal representation and institutional access order before him. Its meaning was simple. It was a formal command defining who could receive palace information, use royal channels, or claim institutional connection in public dealings. The prince read every line twice because it did not merely change procedure. It permanently ended Meghan Markle's access to private royal briefings, palace correspondence, family representation rights, and any future use of royal ties in commercial or public negotiations. The future king slowed when he reached Meghan's name. He remembered that she had entered the family as Harry's chosen partner, beside the brother he had protected since childhood. That memory made the decision heavier, not easier. William understood why it mattered. Private briefings could shape national projects before public release, while palace correspondence carried authority businesses might mistake for support. Leaving those channels open risked turning family access into influence. Closing them meant accepting that Harry would see the act as a wound. Catherine watched his face tighten as he lifted the pen. She had seen him angry before, but this was different. The Princess of Wales noticed that after he signed, his fingers remained locked around it, as though releasing it would make the decision real. He felt no victory, only duty. Then an aide pointed to the final clause, and the room grew colder. Harry could not reverse the order through private appeals, meaning the Duke could no longer negotiate directly with his brother on Meghan's behalf. William looked up when another page was revealed. The document also authorized a review of every confidential royal communication linked to the Sussexes since their departure, a search that could expose far more than expected. As the sealed copy was carried toward the door, the prince asked one quiet question. Had Meghan already been informed? The aide answered no. Harry would hear first. But before the order could reach California, the people bound to it had to confront what William's signature had truly taken away. This was never simply a clash between a prince and a duchess. At its heart stood two brothers who had once walked behind the same coffin, trusted the same memories, and believed nothing could permanently divide them. Now Meghan's future connection to the crown rested beneath William's signature, while Harry faced the unbearable truth that the institution he rejected still possessed the power to close its doors forever. Harry stared at the secure phone when the palace secretary's name appeared. For one reckless second, he believed William had called to reopen the door between them. The hope vanished almost immediately. The official explained that the signed order was final, and that no private appeal could delay its effect. A palace secretary is a senior aide who delivers formal decisions for the royal household, which meant this was not one brother warning another. It was the crown speaking through procedure. Harry stopped pacing and listened as the last expectation left his face. Meghan watched him from across the room and knew something had broken before he spoke. She had spent years building an independent public identity in America through interviews, projects, and business plans beyond palace control. Yet her marriage still tied every appearance and statement to the royal family. That connection gave her global influence, but it also meant the monarchy could define where personal association ended and official royal influence began. When Harry finally lowered the phone, she asked whether the prince wanted peace. His silence answered first. William carried a different burden inside Windsor. He was no longer only the protective elder brother who had once shielded Harry from public pressure. He had become guardian of the monarchy's future, responsible for preventing private affection from weakening institutional boundaries. Catherine had privately urged him to preserve one narrow route through which family concerns could still reach them. The Princess of Wales feared that a complete wall would turn pain into permanent bitterness. William understood, but he refused to let emotional contact become a hidden path around the restrictions. The future king believed one exception would make every clause meaningless. Harry finally asked what the order actually changed. The answer cut with precision. His birthright remained untouched, but Meghan's access to private briefings, palace channels, and implied royal influence had ended. A birthright is a status inherited by birth, meaning his place as the king's son remained his, even while his wife's institutional connection was severed. Harry closed his eyes, then asked the question William knew would come. Why now? The secretary paused before describing the private incident that had transformed years of mistrust into action. To understand why William finally signed, the story must return to the evening when Meghan's name appeared in a place the palace believed was protected. For months, the palace had endured interviews, accusations, and painful public distance. None of it forced William's hand. The true breaking point came during a private charity reception at St. James's Palace, when a confidential royal initiative appeared in an American presentation before it had even been announced in Britain. One detail inside that presentation could only have come from a restricted family briefing, and William immediately knew the breach was personal. William had entered the reception determined to keep the evening focused on service, not family conflict. Beside him, Catherine spoke with leaders from several national charities involved in a confidential mental health program that had taken months to prepare. The initiative was a planned joint campaign connecting royal support with charities across Britain, and only a small planning circle knew its language, launch date, and partnership structure. That secrecy mattered, because an early leak could damage negotiations, embarrass the organizations involved, and make the monarchy appear unable to protect sensitive work. An aide approached the prince with a phone and quietly asked him to watch. A live stream from a Los Angeles media event showed Meghan presenting a project built around the same language, the same timeline, and the same partnership model. William's expression changed when she repeated one phrase exactly as it appeared in the restricted briefing. The words were not similar. They were identical. Across the room, the Princess of Wales saw him stop listening to the reception around him and understood that the evening had just become something far more dangerous. William left the corridor and called Harry directly. The Duke answered with surprise, then grew defensive when his brother read the copied phrase aloud. Harry admitted that he had received a courtesy summary because the program touched causes once associated with both brothers. A courtesy summary was private information shared out of respect rather than official need, and he had been clearly instructed not to release it. Harry insisted he had mentioned the initiative only during a conversation at home and never imagined it would appear in a presentation. His explanation did not calm the future king. It confirmed the path the information had taken. Catherine later reviewed a documented account from one of the charities and found something worse. A prospective commercial partner had referred to Meghan's royal family connections while discussing possible access to the British program. The private leak had now become an institutional threat because an outside company believed family ties could influence royal decisions. William read the account twice, then ordered a private meeting with Harry and Meghan before signing anything. He wanted one final explanation, but the document already waiting at Windsor suggested his patience had nearly ended. When the three finally faced one another, the argument was no longer about a leaked phrase. It was about trust that might never be restored. No aides were allowed inside. No private secretaries waited beside the table. William, Harry, and Meghan entered the room, carrying years of resentment that had never been spoken without cameras, statements, or advisors standing between them. The future king placed the copied briefing on the table. Meghan did not look away. Then William asked the question that would decide whether this was still a family dispute or an act against the crown. William had chosen a private Windsor sitting room because he wanted one last chance to handle the matter as family before palace procedure took control. A private secretary is a senior royal aide who manages official work and sensitive communication, but none had been invited. The prince wanted no buffer, no witness, and no excuse. He placed the confidential briefing beside a transcript of Meghan's Los Angeles presentation, with every identical phrase marked in red. Harry looked down at the pages, then back at his brother. The evidence felt less like paperwork and more like an accusation laid between them. Meghan admitted she had seen the summary, but she refused to accept that using broad language about mental health amounted to stealing William's work. She argued that the ideas were universal, that no one owned compassion, and that she had never claimed control of the royal program. The Duchess kept her voice steady, yet anger sharpened every word. Harry turned toward William and accused him of treating his wife as a permanent suspect, someone judged before she entered any room. The future king answered just as quietly. Trust, he said, could not survive repeated boundary violations disguised as misunderstandings. William then revealed the detail neither of them expected. A commercial partner connected to the Los Angeles event had contacted a representative of the Royal Foundation, believing Meghan possessed informal authority to discuss future cooperation with the palace. A Royal Foundation is a charitable organization linked to working members of the family, so any false impression of access could damage negotiations and public trust. Harry's face changed. Meghan insisted she had promised no agreement, but the prince replied that implied influence could be as dangerous as a written promise. Meghan pushed her chair back and asked whether the meeting had been arranged to hear her explanation or simply to justify a punishment already prepared. William did not answer at once. He reached into the file and slid the unsigned royal representation and institutional access order across the table. The document would formally remove palace access and prevent royal connections from being used in public or commercial dealings. Harry reached for it, but his brother stopped his hand. William said the decision would not rest on anger alone. Someone with authority neither brother could dismiss had spent weeks tracing the breach, and her evidence would determine what happened next. Behind William's anger stood a quieter power, one that had spent weeks tracing exactly how far the breach had traveled. William held the pen, but he had not acted alone. Before the document reached his desk, palace lawyers, senior courtiers, and King Charles had examined every consequence. Yet the most decisive voice belonged to Princess Anne, who cared less about headlines than precedent. She believed one unresolved breach could become a doorway for every future exploitation of the monarchy, and she was prepared to close it, even if Harry never forgave her. Anne had overseen the private review from the beginning, reading every account, communication trail, and legal warning connected to Meghan's remaining access. The review was a confidential examination designed to determine whether those informal links created legal, reputational, or constitutional danger for the royal household. Its conclusion was cold but clear. Family conversations could not be controlled because no institution could police what relatives said inside their homes. Private briefings, palace correspondence, and implied representation were different. Those could be restricted before personal access was mistaken for official authority. Charles read the recommendation alone. The king removed his glasses, placed them beside the file, and sat without speaking as the weight of written sanctions settled over him. A sanction was a formal restriction imposed after a breach, and seeing that language connected to his son's wife left him devastated. He understood why the decision mattered. If outside organizations believed Meghan could influence royal programs, public trust could collapse. Yet if he approved the order, Harry might see not protection, but rejection from his own father. Anne entered later, and found her brother still staring at the final page. She did not soften the warning. Avoiding pain now, the Princess Royal told him, would only force William to inherit a greater crisis later. The prince would one day carry responsibility for every unresolved weakness left behind. Charles looked away when she mentioned Harry, but Anne reminded him that protecting one wounded son could not come at the cost of exposing the future crown. The lawyers had uncovered 2 earlier occasions when outside organizations believed Meghan could privately influence royal initiatives, even though she held no formal authority. One involved a charity partnership, the other concerned access to a palace-backed campaign. Neither attempt succeeded, but both revealed the same dangerous assumption. Anne then insisted on the clause blocking indirect appeals through Harry. Without it, she argued, the order would become symbolic, easy to challenge through private pressure. Charles finally approved the framework, but he demanded one personal concession. Meghan would hear the decision from Harry before palace departments received their internal instructions. It was the last mercy he could offer. That small act of mercy could not soften what followed when Harry returned home, carrying the words his wife never expected to hear. By the time Harry reached Meghan, the document had already begun moving through palace departments. Passwords were scheduled for removal. Private contact lists were being revised. Invitations once handled as family courtesies would now require formal approval. Yet inside their home, none of those administrative details mattered at first. What mattered was Harry standing before his wife, unable to hide that his brother had drawn a boundary around her name. Harry explained that the order did not remove Meghan's Duchess title, but it ended her private institutional access and any assumption that she could speak through royal relationships. A Duchess title is a formal rank connected to marriage, but it does not automatically grant authority inside the palace. The distinction mattered because she would still be publicly linked to the monarchy while losing the private channels that once gave that link real weight. Meghan listened without interrupting, her face controlled, until he finished. Meghan then asked the question Harry had feared most. Had he defended her? The Duke said yes, but the pause before his answer wounded her more deeply than the words that followed. She understood that hesitation. It meant he had argued with William, yet somewhere inside that confrontation, he had also accepted part of the case against her. Harry finally admitted that he had shared the confidential briefing during a private conversation at home. He had not expected the language to appear publicly, but he could no longer deny that his choice had opened the door. Harry felt the anger turn inward. He had spent years accusing the palace of failing to protect his family. Yet now his own carelessness had helped create the restriction closing around Meghan. She asked why his brother had punished her for information he had provided. The Duke answered that the future king viewed the problem not as one leak, but as a pattern of blurred influence. Neither of them found comfort in that explanation. Meghan read the order herself and stopped at the conduct review clause. The clause allowed the palace to consider further action if royal connections were invoked commercially after the effective date. That meant future interviews, partnerships, or proposals could trigger another response if they suggested private access to the crown. Then the first visible consequence arrived. An invitation connected to a major British memorial event was quietly withdrawn, and the absence would be noticed. Meghan placed the papers down and said she would answer publicly. Harry asked her to wait. He wanted one final private conversation with William before anger turned the family fracture into something no one could repair. For the first time since the rupture began, the brothers agreed to meet without wives, lawyers, or palace officials standing between them. The second meeting was nothing like the first. There were no files on the table, and no accusations prepared in advance. William and Harry met alone in a small room at Kensington Palace, where photographs of their childhood still stood beyond the reach of official disputes. For several minutes, neither brother spoke. Then Harry asked whether the document was really about protecting the monarchy or punishing the woman he loved. Harry had requested the meeting because he believed only a direct appeal could stop Meghan from answering the palace in public. The Duke knew one angry statement could turn a private wound into a national battle, and he feared that once she spoke, William would answer through procedure rather than family. The prince agreed to listen, but he made one point clear before the conversation went further. The signed order would not be withdrawn or renegotiated. A signed royal order was a formal instruction already approved for palace use, which meant personal regret could not erase its legal and administrative effect. Harry said the restrictions had made Meghan feel permanently rejected, not merely corrected. He argued that every closed channel sent the same message: she would never again be trusted, no matter what she did next. William listened, then answered with painful control. Rejection and accountability were not the same thing. The future king said the order did not erase her place in Harry's life, or deny their children's family connection. It only ended the belief that private relationships could still provide access to official royal influence. William finally admitted what he had refused to say in the first meeting. He missed his brother. He hated that every conversation between them now carried the risk of legal review, public exposure, or another statement released, before either man had time to breathe. The prince's anger weakened as he spoke, revealing grief beneath years of discipline. Harry looked away, because hearing that confession made forgiveness feel closer and more difficult at the same time. Harry then revealed through their private recorded conversation that he had forwarded the briefing without reading the confidentiality warning carefully. Meghan had not entered palace systems or taken the document herself. The Duke's carelessness had placed it before her. William absorbed the admission in silence. It did not remove the breach, but it changed where the deepest blame belonged. William agreed to preserve one private family contact route, completely separate from institutional business. It would allow personal messages without restoring briefings, influence, or palace access. The brothers left through different doors, but Harry called Meghan before reaching his car. He asked her not to attack William publicly. One part of their bond had survived. The private compromise remained hidden, but the signed order could not stay secret once Britain awakened to the consequences of William's decision. The story broke before sunrise. By breakfast, William's secret signature dominated broadcasts, newspaper websites, and conversations across Britain. Some saw a future king protecting the crown with overdue strength. Others saw a family dispute hardened into official exclusion. Yet one image captured the national mood more powerfully than any commentator. A silent crowd gathering outside Kensington Palace, beneath a newspaper headline declaring that William had finally closed the royal door. Catherine watched the morning coverage from inside the palace and felt no sense of triumph. The leaked summary claimed that Meghan had lost private briefing access, representation privileges, and informal contact routes with royal offices. Representation privileges meant the ability to be treated as someone who could speak through, influence, or approach the royal household. Their removal mattered because businesses and charities could no longer assume that her family connection carried institutional weight. The Princess of Wales knew William had signed to protect that boundary, but she also knew the decision had cost him part of his brother. Outside, the reaction grew louder. The fictional London Herald appeared with a black royal seal, split by a white line beneath the headline, "William draws the line." Hundreds gathered at the palace gates, some holding Union flags in support of the prince, while others carried handwritten signs defending Harry and condemning the exclusion of Meghan. The crowd did not chant at first. That silence gave the moment its force. Britain was not simply reacting to palace procedure. It was choosing sides inside a family wound. Meghan saw the same front page in California and froze when photographs of William signing ceremonial papers appeared beside her name. The images were not of the secret document, yet they made the story feel official and merciless. She felt the public had turned humiliation, anger, and betrayal into morning entertainment. Harry stayed near her, but neither spoke for several minutes. He understood why the coverage hurt. Every headline reduced their private argument to victory for one side and defeat for the other. Palace communications finally confirmed that updated protocols existed, but refused to release the confidential order itself. A protocol is a formal rule guiding how royal offices handle access and communication, and the careful wording only deepened suspicion. A national broadcaster described the decision as the first clear sign of how William intended to rule. Personally compassionate, but institutionally uncompromising. The future king heard that verdict and did not celebrate. He prepared a private statement for Charles, explaining that the signature could not become revenge, spectacle, or proof of strength. It had to mean something harder, an end to blurred boundaries, even when enforcing them caused suffering. The country had delivered its judgment loudly, but the final verdict would be formed in a quiet room between a king and the son destined to replace him. When William entered his father's room, there was nothing left to authorize. The document had been signed, the restrictions enforced, and the nation divided over whether he had acted with courage or cruelty. Charles asked only one question. Did his son believe the monarchy had been protected? William answered that protection was not the same as triumph. Something necessary had been saved, but something deeply personal had also been lost. William explained that the order had never been designed to erase Meghan from the family. It separated private relationships from institutional authority after trust had been broken. Institutional authority meant the official power to speak for, influence, or act through the monarchy. That boundary mattered because charities, businesses, and public figures could no longer mistake family access for royal approval. The prince believed the crown could survive personal pain, but it could not survive confusion over who truly possessed its authority. Charles listened without interrupting. The king accepted that the monarchy could no longer depend on blurred boundaries, private promises, or family connections interpreted as official support. Yet he admitted that his greatest fear was losing Harry completely. The monarch had already watched distance harden into anger, and he knew another palace decision might push his younger son beyond return. William answered that ignoring the breach would have created resentment just as destructive. Silence might have protected one moment, but it would have poisoned every future conversation between the brothers. Meghan faced her own decision in California. She held the confrontational statement she had prepared, then told Harry she would not release it. The Duchess said she would build her future without seeking access to the institution that had closed itself to her. Harry understood the strength inside those words, but he also heard the grief beneath them. The Duke had defended his wife, yet he now accepted that his careless sharing of the confidential briefing had triggered the crisis. William returned to the document and placed his personal copy inside a locked cabinet rather than the public archive. A public archive preserves official records for future institutional reference, but he refused to let this order become a trophy of royal power. It would remain what it truly was, a private family wound with official consequences. Moments later, Harry sent a brief message. He understood the difference between family contact and royal access, though he could not yet forgive how the decision had been made. The signature became the defining test of William's future reign. He chose the stability of the crown over the comfort of avoiding conflict, while preserving one narrow human connection to his brother. Meghan lost institutional access but gained clarity. Harry remained divided, yet accepted responsibility. The monarchy survived, but it emerged more controlled, more distant, and painfully aware that survival sometimes demands boundaries no family would willingly choose. And with the cabinet locked, the message was final. Meghan's path and the monarchy's future would continue separately, while William carried the permanent cost of the signature that made it so. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.